Vought Tower rose above Manhattan like a monument to everything wrong with power. Clark saw it first, his eyes cutting through distance and smog to take in the gleaming spire, the corporate logo blazing against the night sky, the helicopters circling like vultures around Carrion. The building was beautiful in the way weapons were beautiful, precise, engineered, designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. "Home sweet home," Homelander announced, his cape snapping in the wind as he led the procession through the sky. 99 floors of the finest security, technology, and amenities your tax dollars can buy. Well, he glanced back with a smile that was all teeth. Not your tax dollars. You don't exist here, but you get the idea. Tony flew beside Clark, his armor's flight systems compensating for the damage sustained in the plaza battle. His HUD was working overtime, scanning the tower's external defenses, cataloging guard positions, mapping escape routes. Force of habit. When you'd been kidnapped as many times as Tony Stark, you learned to plan exits before you planned entrances. 18 surface-to-air emplacements, he murmured through the private comm channel he'd established with the other heroes. Radar systems, thermal imaging, what looks like some kind of bioscanner at the main entrance. Nothing that could stop any of us, but enough to slow down a normal assault force. "They're not worried about normal assault forces," Bruce replied. He was being carried by Clark, a concession to practicality that clearly irritated him. The Dark Knight did not enjoy being carried. They're worried about public perception. The defenses are theater, a show of strength for the cameras. "Everything here is theater," Steve observed. He was being transported by Tony, magnetic clamps securing his shield to the armor's back. The costumes, the logos, the constant media coverage. It's not heroism, it's branding. "Welcome to late-stage capitalism," Peter quipped. He'd webbed himself to Iron Man's leg, conserving his web fluid for emergencies, where even saving lives comes with a licensing agreement. They landed on the tower's executive helipad, a platform large enough to accommodate the Seven's usual dramatic entrances. Vought security was already waiting, a phalanx of black-suited operatives trying very hard to look like they weren't terrified of the beings descending from the sky. Sister Sage touched down first, already issuing orders through a communicator embedded in her costume's collar. "I want full spectral analysis of the breach site within the hour. Cross-reference with any similar events in our historical database. And get me Dr. Hamdan from the V Research Division. If anyone can make sense of the energy signatures, it's him." "Dr. Hamdan?" Tony's interest piqued despite himself. "You have scientists studying superhuman phenomena? Actual researchers, not just." He gestured vaguely at the security forces. "Goons with guns? Vought is many things. Mr. Stark." Tony Stark, Mr. Stark. Sage's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. "Vought is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. We've been studying Compound V and its effects for decades. We understand power better than anyone on this planet." "Compound V," Bruce repeated quietly. "That's what gives your soups their abilities? You catch on quick, dark and brooding." Firecracker had landed nearby, her contempt undisguised. "It's a drug. A special drug that makes special people. Unlike whatever circus you freaks crawled out of. Firecracker." Sage's voice carried warning. "We discussed this. I know. Play nice with the interdimensional weirdos." Firecracker's smile was sharp as broken glass. "But I don't have to like it. And I definitely don't have to pretend they're anything other than what they are. Problems waiting to happen." Clark stepped forward, positioning himself between Firecracker's hostility and his allies. His voice remained calm, measured, the voice of a man who had faced far worse than political theater. "We're not your enemies. We've said that repeatedly. If you want to keep treating us like threats, that's your choice. But every minute we spend posturing is a minute the real threats." He met Homelander's eyes. "The ones from our worlds who actually want to cause harm are using to plan, to prepare, to do damage. Homelander's smile didn't waver. So concerned, so heroic. Tell me, Kansas, do you practice that speech in front of a mirror, or does righteous indignation just come naturally? Neither. Clark didn't rise to the bait. It comes from burying people who died because someone decided their ego was more important than doing the right thing. I've seen worlds burn because powerful men couldn't stop measuring themselves against each other. I won't let that happen here. The silence that followed was heavy, charged. Then Sage cleared her throat. The war room. Now. All of us. Her eyes swept across both groups, heroes and Seven, strangers and hosts. We have work to do, and I refuse to let testosterone and trauma derail it. Move. She turned and walked toward the tower's interior entrance without waiting to see if anyone followed. After a moment, they did. Even Homelander. The war room was everything Tony expected, and nothing Bruce approved of. Massive screens dominated every wall, cycling through news feeds, social media aggregates, and real-time surveillance data from across the city. A holographic table occupied the center, crude by Stark standards, but functional, projecting a three-dimensional map of Manhattan that updated with each new data point. Vought technicians moved between stations, their fingers dancing across interfaces, their eyes carefully avoiding the impossible figures who had just walked in. "Welcome to the Nerve Center," Sage announced, gesturing at the setup with something approaching pride. Every superhero event, every potential threat, every piece of media coverage, we track it all. In real time. Globally. Surveillance state with a corporate logo, Bruce muttered. Charming. Effective. Sage corrected. You can moralize about it later, after we've caught your friends. They're not our friends. Steve's voice was hard. They're threats we were actively fighting when the breach occurred. The man in green armor, Doom, is a dictator who's conquered nations. The bald one in your power armor's weight class, Luthor, has tried to kill Superman more times than either of them can count. And the others? He trailed off, looking at Bruce. The clown is mine, Batman said flatly. The Joker, serial killer, mass murderer, chaos agent. He has no pattern, no demands, no goals beyond destruction. Every second he's loose in your city, people are dying. 3 confirmed so far, Sage said, pulling up a display. All within a 4-block radius of the initial breach site. Cause of death, lacerations, blunt force trauma, and in one case, she grimaced, Joker venom. Some kind of paralytic toxin that locks the facial muscles into a rictus grin while the victim asphyxiates. Peter made a sound that wasn't quite a word. That's really messed up. He's really messed up. Bruce's voice was controlled, but something dark moved behind his eyes. I need access to your surveillance network. Camera feeds, traffic monitoring, facial recognition if you have it. He'll be hiding in plain sight, he always does, but he'll also be leaving signs. Messages. He can't resist an audience. Homelander lounged against the wall, arms crossed, watching the exchange with poorly concealed amusement. And what about the others? The dictator and the bald guy? Underground, Tony answered. He'd already interfaced with the holographic table, his armor systems providing data the Vought techs couldn't. They accessed the subway system near the plaza and headed northeast. I lost their signatures around. He highlighted a section of the map. Here. Some kind of shielded facility. Your people built something under the city that blocks my sensors. Sage's expression flickered. The Meridian campus. Research and development. Restricted access. Restricted from whom? From everyone who doesn't need to know it exists. Tony leaned forward. Well, now you've got 2 genius-level megalomaniacs who definitely know it exists and are probably already taking it apart to see how it works. So maybe the restriction policy needs an update. He's right. Clark stepped up to the table, his eyes scanning the map. Doom and Luthor together represent an unprecedented threat. Separately, each of them has conquered corporations, governments, armies. Together, with access to your technology. Technology they don't understand yet, but will soon. They could destabilize your entire power structure within days. Homelander's smile sharpened. You seem very concerned about our power structure, Kansas. Why? Thinking of staying? Setting up shop? Maybe you'd like to try on my costume, see how it fits? I'm concerned about innocent people, Clark replied evenly. Your power structure only matters to me insofar as it affects them. If Doom and Luthor gain control of Vaught's resources, the people who suffer won't be you or me. They'll be the ones who can't fly away. Something dangerous flickered in Homelander's eyes. The ones who can't fly away, he repeated slowly. You mean the weak, the helpless, the ones who need us. I mean the people you're supposed to protect. Protect. Homelander pushed off the wall, crossing the room with deliberate slowness. That's an interesting word. It implies obligation, duty. Like I owe them something just because I can crush them without trying. You do. Do I? He stopped directly in front of Clark, close enough that their chests almost touched. And who decided that? Who made the rules? You? Some farmer in Kansas? His voice dropped to a whisper. Or maybe nobody. Maybe there are no rules. Maybe power is its own justification, and everything else is just stories we tell ourselves so we can sleep at night. Clark held his ground. You don't believe that, don't I? No. If you did, you wouldn't need the applause, the adoration, the 17 million people watching you be a hero. Clark's voice was soft, almost gentle. You just take what you wanted and damn the consequences. But you don't. You perform. You pose. You wait for the cameras to roll before you save the day. Because somewhere, deep down, you still care what they think of you. Homelander's jaw tightened. That's not power, Clark continued. That's need. And need makes you vulnerable. It makes you human. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then Sage cleared her throat. Gentlemen, the underground facility. Can we focus? Homelander held Clark's gaze for one more heartbeat. Then he stepped back, smile returning like a mask sliding into place. Of course. Sage. Always so practical. He gestured at the map with exaggerated courtesy. Please, show our guests how to find their friends. I'm sure they're eager to get home. The threat beneath the words was unmistakable. Bruce and Tony exchanged glances. Peter's spider sense hummed at a low, constant frequency. Steve's hand rested on his shield. And Barry Allen, leaning against the wall because standing had become an effort, watched the man who looked like Superman and the monster who wore his colors circle each other like binary stars. Neither of them was going to back down. The only question was what would be left standing when they finally collided. 3 miles beneath Manhattan, Dr. Doom found exactly what he'd been looking for. The Vought Meridian campus was a cathedral of corporate ambition, a sprawling underground complex that stretched across multiple city blocks, its corridors gleaming with sterile white light and the quiet hum of technology decades ahead of the surface world. Laboratories branched off in every direction, each one dedicated to a different aspect of Compound V research, enhancement protocols, genetic modification, power amplification, containment strategies. Doom had breached their security in 11 minutes. It would have been 7, but he'd wanted to study their encryption methods first. They were sophisticated by this world's standards. By his, they were quaint. Impressive, Lex Luthor admitted, examining a display that showed the molecular structure of Compound V. His warsuit's gauntlets interfaced with the terminal, downloading data at speeds the facility's systems weren't designed to handle. A stable mutagenic compound that grants superhuman abilities without immediate cellular degradation. The applications are limited. Doom's voice echoed behind his mask, dismissive. The compound grants power randomly, without precision or control. A crude instrument. The recipients are tools, not architects. Tools have their uses. Tools are replaced when superior alternatives emerge. Doom moved through the laboratory with the casual ownership of a man surveying his future kingdom. This technology could be refined, improved, made selective. Imagine an army of enhanced soldiers, each one engineered for a specific purpose, their abilities complementary rather than chaotic. You're thinking too small. Lex's lips curled into something approaching a smile. An army serves a general. What I'm seeing here is the foundation for something more fundamental, a new definition of humanity. Controlled evolution, the ability to elevate chosen individuals while leaving the masses exactly where they are. And who would choose these individuals? Who else? Lex met Doom's mask with eyes that held no uncertainty, the ones qualified to make such decisions, the ones with the vision to see beyond conventional limitations. You mean yourself. I mean us. Lex gestured at the screens surrounding them, data on superhuman physiology, power metrics, psychological profiles. We're the same, you and I. Geniuses surrounded by lesser minds, forced to watch as the powerful squander gifts they never earned. You conquered your nation because you knew you could rule it better than any democratically elected fool. I've spent my life fighting a god who fell from the sky and decided to play hero, not because he earned the right, but because he had the power and someone told him what to do with it. Doom was silent for a long moment. You speak of the Kryptonian. I speak of the principle. Lex turned back to the data stream, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. Superman is a symptom, not a disease. The disease is the idea that power creates obligation, that strength must be shackled to service, that capability requires permission. It's a lie the weak tell the strong to keep them docile. And the creature who calls himself Homelander? What is he? Lex's smile sharpened. Proof that I'm right. A being with Superman's power and none of his restraint. No Kansas. No farm. No moral compass handed down from dead aliens. Just raw capability, shaped by the only force that matters, self-interest. He paused. He's also proof that power without intelligence is merely dangerous. Homelander is a weapon. He needs someone to aim him. You believe you could aim him? I believe I could replace him. Lex pulled up a schematic, enhancement protocols, neural modification, genetic optimization. Compound V is just the beginning. This facility contains research into power amplification, ability stacking, even consciousness transfer. With time and resources, I could create something better, something perfect, something you control, something that serves humanity's best interests, as defined by those qualified to determine them. Doom studied the schematic in silence. Then, slowly, he began to laugh. The sound was cold, metallic, utterly without humor. You misunderstand the nature of our arrangement, Luthor. Doom turned to face his temporary ally, and the mask's eyes seemed to glow with reflected light. I do not seek partners. I do not share power. I tolerate your presence because your knowledge is useful, and your technology is not entirely primitive. But do not mistake tolerance for respect. Lex's expression didn't change. And you misunderstand me. I'm not proposing partnership. I'm proposing efficiency. You want to conquer this world. I can see it in every move you make. But conquest requires infrastructure, legitimacy, a power base. Vought provides all three. Vought serves the fool in the cape. Vought serves whoever controls Vought. Lex stepped closer, his warsuit systems humming with potential energy. Homelander is their figurehead, not their master. The real power is institutional. Board members, shareholders, government contracts, media control. Replace the head, maintain the body. It's how civilized people conduct hostile takeovers. Doom considered this. And the heroes? The ones who followed us through the breach? Distractions. They'll be busy fighting Homelander, protecting civilians, arguing about morality. By the time they realize what we've built, it will be too late to stop it." Lex smiled. "I've been playing this game for decades. I know how to keep heroes looking the wrong direction. And the Joker?" For the first time, Lex's composure flickered. "The Joker is an unpredictable element. He has no goals I can anticipate, no leverage I can exploit. He exists purely to create chaos, which makes him useless as an ally and dangerous as a variable. Then he must be eliminated." "Agreed, but not by us. Let the heroes chase their clown. Let Homelander throw tantrums about territorial violations. We stay underground, we build our base, and we let them exhaust each other." Lex turned back to the data stream. "When the dust settles, we'll be the only ones left standing." Doom was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, a small, precise gesture of agreement. "Very well, Luthor. We proceed. But remember, Doom does not share thrones. When this world is rebuilt, there will be one ruler, and it will not be you. We'll see." They returned to their work, two geniuses building an empire in the dark, neither trusting the other for a second, neither needing to. Mutual destruction was assured if either betrayed. Until then, cooperation was simply logical. And in the shadows of the adjacent corridor, watching through a ventilation grate with eyes that glittered gold and crimson, Loki smiled. Fascinating, he thought. Absolutely fascinating. He'd found exactly the chaos he was looking for. The Joker had found a comedy club. It was a small place, basement level, brick walls, the kind of establishment where aspiring comedians died slow deaths in front of audiences of 12. The sign outside read laugh track in neon letters, one of which had burned out months ago and never been replaced. Perfect. He'd killed the doorman first, then the bartender, then the comedian on stage, a nervous young man telling jokes about dating apps, who had looked so confused when the pale stranger in the purple suit walked up and asked if he wanted to hear something really funny. The audience had tried to run, of course. They always did. But the Joker had locked the doors from the inside, and by the time they realized what was happening, 3 of them were already laughing, the paralytic kind of laughing, the kind that didn't stop until your lungs gave out and your face froze in a permanent grin. Now he sat on the stage, legs dangling over the edge, surrounded by bodies in various states of hilarity. Tough crowd, he mused, examining the blood on his fingers. Really tough crowd. But that's the thing about comedy, isn't it? Timing is everything. He'd been watching the news on the club's single television, VIN coverage of the dimensional breach, the battle in the plaza, the standoff between Homelander and the stranger in the cape. The production values were impressive, very professional, very controlled. That was the word. Everything in this world was controlled. The heroes, the villains, the narrative. Someone was writing the story, and everyone else was just reading their lines. How boring. How desperately, achingly, soul-crushingly boring. But you, the Joker pointed at the television, where footage of Homelander's smile was frozen mid-frame. You're interesting. You're the punchline they don't know they're building toward. The joke that writes itself. He hopped off the stage, stepping over a woman whose face was locked in a rictus of terrified amusement. The Venom broadcast had moved on to analysis, talking heads discussing the interdimensional crisis, speculating about Vaught's response, carefully avoiding any suggestion that their golden god might have been challenged. They don't see it yet, the Joker continued, speaking to no one, to everyone, to the universe itself. They don't understand that you're the biggest joke of all. A man with the power of a god and the ego of a child. A hero who needs applause more than he needs air. A symbol, he drew out the word, savoring it, built on absolutely nothing. He picked up a fallen microphone, tested it. Still working. The club's sound system hummed to life. You know what the difference is between Superman and Homelander? He asked the question to the corpses, to the camera he'd propped up on a table, to the stream he'd started broadcasting to whatever dark corners of the internet would receive it. Superman believes the lie. He thinks he's good because someone told him to be good, and he was stupid enough to listen. It's almost sweet, like a dog that thinks it's people. He began to pace, his voice rising and falling with the practiced cadence of a man who'd spent his life commanding attention. But Homelander? Homelander knows it's a lie. He knows he's not a hero. He knows he's just a product, a very expensive, very dangerous product that Vought winds up and points at problems. And he hates it. He hates every second of it. But he can't stop, because the applause is the only thing that makes the emptiness go away. The Joker stopped, turning to face the camera directly. His smile widened, not a performance now, but something genuine, something terrible. That's why I like him. That's why I came all this way, across dimensions and realities and whatever other cosmic nonsense got me here. Because Homelander is the funniest thing I've ever seen. A man with unlimited power and unlimited need. A god who's terrified of being alone. He leaned closer to the lens. And do you know what happens to people like that? When they finally realize that no amount of worship will ever fill the hole inside them? His voice dropped to a whisper. They break. Completely. Catastrophically. Beautifully. He straightened, spreading his arms wide. And when Homelander breaks, when he finally snaps and shows the world what he really is, I want a front row seat. I want to watch 17 million people realize that their hero was the monster all along. I want to see the looks on their faces when they understand that they built this. They asked for this. They begged to be lied to. And now the liar is going to tear them apart. The Joker laughed, a sound that echoed through the empty club, bouncing off brick walls stained with blood and tragedy. That's the punchline. That's the joke. And the beautiful thing is, he wiped a tear from his eye, still giggling. They're going to do all the work for me. I just have to wait. Watch. Maybe give things a little push now and then. He turned off the camera. Then, he picked up the phone he'd taken from the bartender's corpse and began to scroll through contacts. Local numbers. Media people. A few that looked government-adjacent. Now, he murmured, let's see who wants to help me set up the punchline. The bodies smiled at him. They had no choice. Somewhere above, in the gleaming towers of Vought and the borrowed authority of temporary alliances, heroes and monsters circled each other, convinced they were the ones writing the story. They weren't. The Joker had been writing stories his whole life. And this one, this beautiful broken world of corporate gods and manufactured heroism, was going to be his masterpiece. All he needed was patience. And a really, really good straight man. His eyes drifted back to the television, where Homelander's frozen smile still filled the screen. Perfect, he whispered. Absolutely perfect. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Billy Butcher had been watching Vought Tower through binoculars from a rooftop 6 blocks away, chain-smoking cigarettes that no longer affected his compound V-enhanced lungs, and trying to figure out what the bloody hell he was supposed to do with any of this. The tumor in his brain pulsed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder that his borrowed time was running out, that every day he spent breathing was a day stolen from the death he'd earned. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Encrypted routing. He answered anyway. Butcher. The voice was female. Tired. Familiar. It's Annie. He exhaled smoke that dissipated in the cold night air. Starlight. Thought you'd gone to ground after the shitstorm at the Capitol. I did, but I've been monitoring Vaught's comms. Something's happening. Something big. A pause. Did you see the breach? Saw it. Saw what came out of it. Saw your boyfriend's evil twin have a staring contest with Homelander. Butcher's voice was flat, unimpressed. Lot of capes. Lot of drama. Not sure what it has to do with me, everything. Annie's voice sharpened. These people, the ones from the breach, they're not like Vaught's soups. They're not products. They're not controlled. And some of them are actually trying to help. Heroes. Butcher spat the word like a curse. That's what you're selling me? More bloody heroes? One of them faced down Homelander, alone, and Homelander blinked. Annie let that sink in. When's the last time you saw Homelander blink? Butcher didn't answer. He didn't have to. His name is Superman, Annie continued. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like a joke, like another Vought marketing scheme. But I've been watching the footage, analyzing it. This guy isn't performing. He isn't playing to cameras. He genuinely believes in what he's doing. So did you once. Look how that turned out. That's not fair. Fair's got nothing to do with anything, love. Butcher lowered his binoculars, staring at the tower's distant glow. I've spent years fighting supes, watching them lie, watching them kill, watching them smile for the cameras while people died in the shadows. And now you're telling me that somewhere out there is a genuinely good bloke with the power of a god, and I'm supposed to believe he's different? Yes. Why? Because Homelander is terrified of him. Silence stretched between them. Butcher processed the information, turned it over, examined it for the trap he was certain had to be there. Terrified, he repeated slowly. I've never seen him like this. He's covering well, he always does. But the micro-expressions don't lie. When he looks at Superman, he sees something he's never encountered before. Someone who might actually be better than him. Not just stronger, better. And it's eating him alive. Butcher lit another cigarette. The flame reflected in his eyes, cold, calculating, nothing like the fire that had once driven him. What do you want from me, Starlight? I want you to make contact. With the outsiders. The heroes. Whatever you want to call them. Annie's voice was urgent now. They don't know this world. They don't know Vought. Don't know the politics. Don't know who to trust. Right now, they're cooperating with Homelander because they think they have to. But if someone showed them the truth, they'd do what? Fight Vought? Take down Homelander? Butcher laughed, but there was no humor in it. Love, I've been trying to do that for years. I've lost everything. Everyone, and the closest I ever got was a supe who could maybe hurt him, and even that wasn't enough. These people might be. Or they might be another disappointment. Another false hope. Another reason to keep fighting a war we've already lost. Billy. No. The word was sharp. Final. I'm done believing in heroes, Annie. I'm done putting my faith in people with powers and capes and pretty speeches about doing the right thing. The only thing I believe in anymore is putting Homelander in the ground before this tumor puts me in mine. And if these dimensional tourists can help with that, fine. I'll use them. But I won't trust them. I won't follow them. And I bloody well won't let them make me hope again. Silence. Then, quietly, what happened to you, Billy? The same thing that happens to everyone who fights monsters long enough. He took a long drag, watching the smoke curl into darkness. I became one. He hung up before she could respond. The tower glittered in the distance. Somewhere inside, heroes and monsters were making plans, forming alliances, preparing for battles that would reshape this world, or destroy it. And somewhere else, underground, in the shadows, in a blood-soaked comedy club, other forces were moving. Other plans were forming. Butcher finished his cigarette and crushed it beneath his boot. Then he pulled out a second phone, a burner, untraceable, and dialed a number he'd sworn he would never use again. It rang twice. Yeah? The voice on the other end was ragged, exhausted. Huey. Still alive, still running, still trying to be good in a world that punished goodness like a sin. It's me, Butcher said. I need you to do something. Billy? Jesus, I thought you were. Where are you? Are you okay? No. Listen. Butcher stared at the tower, at the helicopters circling, at the distant glow of a world on the edge of transformation. The dimensional freaks. The ones that came through the breach. I need information. Everything Vought knows about them. Everything the government knows. Everything anyone knows. Powers, weaknesses, psychological profiles. All of it. Why? Because I'm going to find out what they really are, and then I'm going to decide whether to help them. His eyes narrowed, or put them down before they make everything worse. Billy, that's insane. These people might be our best chance to. Our best chance died a long time ago, Huey. All that's left now is damage control. He paused. Can you get me the intel or not? A long silence. Then, reluctantly, I can try. But Billy, promise me you won't do anything stupid. Promise me you'll at least talk to them before you decide. Butcher almost laughed. Almost. I'll think about it. He lied. He hung up. The night was cold. The city was quiet. The kind of quiet that came after catastrophe, when everyone was too afraid to go outside, too uncertain to trust that the worst was over. It wasn't over. Butcher knew that better than anyone. It was just beginning. He turned away from the tower and disappeared into the darkness, a monster hunting monsters, a dead man walking toward his final war, and somewhere in the city, in the spaces between surveillance and shadow, 5 separate forces moved toward a collision that would shake the foundations of a world built on lies. Heroes who believed they could save everyone, villains who believed they deserved to rule, a clown who believed nothing mattered but the punchline, a god who believed he was owed worship, and a dying man who believed in nothing at all except revenge. The first night ended. The war had just begun. Dawn broke over Manhattan like a wound reopening. The sun climbed above the eastern skyline, painting Vought Tower in shades of gold and crimson that made the corporate monument look almost beautiful, almost sacred, if you didn't know what happened inside. Clark stood at the window of the conference room they'd been given, watching the light spread across a city that didn't know how close it had come to annihilation, how close it still was. You haven't slept. Bruce's voice came from behind him, quiet and unsurprised. The Dark Knight had spent the night hunting through Vaught's surveillance archives, tracking the Joker's movements through a city that recorded everything but understood nothing. He looked exhausted in a way that transcended physical fatigue, the bone-deep weariness of a man who had chased the same monster across too many years and too many bodies. Neither of you, Clark replied without turning. I don't sleep. Not when he's loose. Bruce moved to stand beside him, his reflection ghosting across the glass. I found his trail. The comedy club. 15 dead. Maybe more. He's broadcasting now. Some kind of manifesto about Homelander. About what he represents. I saw it. Clark's jaw tightened. He's trying to break him. Push him over the edge. He's trying to prove a point. The Joker doesn't care about Homelander specifically. He cares about what Homelander's collapse would demonstrate. That heroism is a lie. That power corrupts absolutely. That the only honest response to an absurd universe is more absurdity. And if Homelander does break? Bruce was silent for a long moment. Then a lot of people die. More than the Joker could ever kill directly. He turned to face Clark, his eyes hard beneath the cowl. Homelander isn't like the threats we face at home. He's not conquering for ideology or revenge. He's not trying to prove anything except that he matters. And when someone like that loses control, I know. Clark finally looked away from the window. I've been trying to reach him, find whatever's left of the person underneath the programming. But every time I get close, something pulls him back. The need for approval, the fear of rejection. It's like watching someone drown in themselves. Some people can't be saved. I don't believe that. I know you don't. Bruce's voice carried something that might have been respect, might have been pity. That's what makes you Superman. And that's what might get us all killed. The door opened behind them. Tony walked in, coffee in hand, his armor folded down to a bodysuit that still hummed with contained power. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair was a disaster, and his expression suggested he'd spent the night arguing with machines that didn't understand his genius. "Good news and bad news," he announced. "Good news, I figured out how to track Doom and Luthor. Their energy signatures are distinctive enough that even Vaught's primitive sensors can isolate them if I boost the signal processing. And the bad news? They've spent the last 8 hours downloading everything in Vaught's research database. Compound V formulas, enhancement protocols, neural modification techniques, genetic engineering templates." Tony took a long sip of coffee. By now, they know more about superhuman creation than anyone on this planet, except maybe the people who invented it, and those people are either dead or working for Vought. Steve entered behind Tony, shield on his arm, his expression the controlled calm of a soldier preparing for a battle he wasn't certain they could win. Peter followed, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his spider sense already humming at low frequency. "We need to move," Steve said. "The longer we wait, the stronger their position becomes. And we still don't know what Loki's doing." "Loki's watching." Bruce pulled up a holographic display, footage from a Meridian campus security camera that he'd accessed through Vaught's network. "I caught a glimpse of him 3 hours ago. He's been following Doom and Luthor, staying hidden, studying their alliance." Waiting for them to show weakness, Tony muttered. "Classic Loki. Let everyone else do the work, then swoop in and take the prize." "Which means we're not just facing a villain coalition," Clark said slowly. "We're facing a 3-way competition. Doom wants to conquer, Luthor wants to control, and Loki wants to manipulate both of them into destroying each other while he claims whatever's left. And the Joker? The Joker wants to watch it all burn." Bruce's voice was flat. "He's not competing for power. He's competing for chaos. And right now, Homelander is his primary target." Peter raised his hand, like a student with an uncomfortable question. "So just to recap, we've got 2 evil geniuses building a superhuman army underground, one god of lies playing everybody against everybody, one homicidal clown trying to drive the world's most powerful, unstable person completely insane, and we're stuck in a tower full of people who would kill us if they thought they could get away with it. Does that about cover it? You forgot the unkillable bounty hunter who's probably very angry about being tricked," Tony added. "Right. Lobo. Great." Peter slumped against the wall. "I'm starting to miss fighting the Sinister Six. At least they had the decency to attack one at a time." Clark turned from the window, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions made in the dark hours before dawn. "We can't fight all of them at once. We need to prioritize. The Joker is killing civilians now. He's the immediate threat. Doom and Luthor are building towards something larger. They're the strategic threat. And Homelander." He paused. "Homelander is the key to everything. If we can stabilize him or neutralize him, the rest becomes manageable. If we can't, Bruce finished, then nothing else matters, because he'll destroy this city trying to prove he's still in control." The sun continued to rise, indifferent to the weight of the conversation it illuminated. Somewhere below, in the depths of Vought Tower, Homelander was watching the same sunrise through different eyes, thinking different thoughts, feeling the cracks in his foundation spreading with each passing hour. He didn't know it yet, but the end was already beginning, and it was going to be anything but clean. The attack came without warning. One moment, the heroes were gathered in the conference room, planning their next move. The next, the windows exploded inward, not from outside, but from the shockwave of something massive hitting the floor above them. The building shuddered, alarms screamed, and through the chaos, a single figure descended through the hole in the ceiling, trailing debris and fury. Lobo had found them. There you fraggin' are. The main man landed in a crouch that cracked the floor, his red eyes blazing with the particular intensity of someone who had spent 8 hours chasing illusions across Manhattan and was now ready to express his displeasure physically. His hook and chain were already spinning, carving arcs through the air that hummed with lethal promise. "Someone owes me a fight," Lobo growled. "A real one, not that illusionist bullshit. And since the goat-horned bastard is hiding somewhere I can't smell him, I figured I'd start with the next best thing." His eyes locked onto Superman. "You." Clark raised his hands slowly. "We don't have to do this. Yeah, we do." Lobo's grin was all teeth. "See, I made a deal with the flag boy over there. Temporary contract. Stick around, help out, get the best fight I've had in decades. But so far, all I've gotten is a warm-up with a trickster who wasn't even really there and a whole lot of waiting." He cracked his neck, producing a sound like breaking timber. "I'm done waiting." Steve stepped forward, shield raised. "Lobo, we had an agreement. The real threats are still out there, Doom, Luthor, the Joker. Fighting each other wastes time and resources we don't have. Don't care. People are dying. Still don't care. Then you're not the warrior I thought you were." Steve's voice hardened. "You're just a thug looking for an excuse to break things." Lobo's grin flickered. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not quite conscience, but something adjacent. Pride, maybe. The pride of a man who had built his reputation on being the best, not the most indiscriminate. "Big words, little man. I don't say anything I can't back up." Steve lowered his shield slightly, but his stance remained ready. "You want to fight? Fine. But not here. Not now. Help us finish what we started, and I promise you, before we leave this world, you'll get the battle you're looking for." "Against who?" Steve glanced at Clark, then back at Lobo, the most powerful being on this planet, a god who's never been truly challenged, someone who needs to learn what it feels like to lose. Lobo's eyes narrowed. "The blonde prick in the cape? The one on all the screens?" "Homelander." Yes. For a long moment, Lobo was silent. His chain stopped spinning, coming to rest against his shoulder. He studied Steve with something approaching respect, the way a predator evaluated another predator. "You're offering me a shot at the top dog. I'm offering you a shot at the only fight on this planet that's worth having. And in exchange, you help us stop the people who are actually trying to destroy things. The clown, the geniuses, the god of lies." Steve's jaw tightened. "When that's done, when the civilians are safe, you can have your fight." "My word on it." Lobo considered this. Then he laughed, a booming, genuine sound that shook dust from the damaged ceiling. "Flag boy, you've got stones the size of moons. All right, fine, I'm in. But if you're lying to me, if this Homelander turns out to be a pushover," his grin sharpened, "I'm taking it out of your hide. Enhanced or not, I'll find a way." "Fair enough." They clasped hands. The grip was crushing on both sides. Super soldier strength meeting Zarnian immortality, but neither flinched. Now, Lobo turned to survey the damaged room, the scattered heroes, the alarms still blaring. "Where's the action? Point me at something I can hit." Tony stepped forward, holographic displays flickering around his gauntlets. "I've got a lock on Doom and Luthor. They're still in the Meridian campus, but they're moving, heading toward a secondary facility about 2 miles east. Something called the Stillwell Wing." "What's in the Stillwell Wing? Based on the files I've accessed?" Tony's expression was grim. "Prototype enhancement chambers, equipment designed to amplify Compound V effects, and enough raw materials to create an army of supes loyal to whoever controls the process." Peter's spider sense spiked. "That sounds bad. That sounds really, really bad. It gets worse." Bruce pulled up additional data, on the holographic display. The Joker's broadcast originated from a comedy club 6 blocks from the Stillwell wing. He's not hiding randomly, he's positioning himself near Doom and Luthor's target. Either he's planning to interfere with their operation, or he's planning to weaponize it. Clark finished. Chaos on a scale even he hasn't achieved before. So we've got 3 separate targets converging on one location, Steve summarized. Doom and Luthor, the Joker, and whatever's in that facility that all of them want. 4 targets, Bruce corrected quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Homelander's been monitoring our communications since we arrived. He knows everything we know. And if he perceives Doom, Luthor, and the Joker as threats to his territory, threats that make him look weak if he doesn't respond personally, the implication hung in the air. He'll go there himself, Clark said. And when he does, all of our problems will be in the same place at the same time. Is that good or bad? Clark looked at Peter, at the young hero who was trying so hard to maintain hope in a world that seemed designed to crush it. I don't know yet, he admitted. But we're about to find out. The alarms continued to wail, the sun continued to rise, and somewhere across the city, forces were converging on a single point, a crucible where everything would be decided. One way or another, the Stillwell wing looked like a tomb. It rose from the industrial waterfront like a monument to secrets, windowless, gray, surrounded by chain-link fencing topped with razor wire that hadn't stopped anyone who really wanted to get in. The Vought logo was painted on the side, faded by years of exposure and neglect. Whatever happened here, the company had long since decided it was better forgotten. Until now. Batman reached the perimeter first, having separated from the group to approach from the shadows. His cowl's lenses cycled through spectrums, thermal, electromagnetic, ultraviolet, building a picture of what waited inside. I count 15 heat signatures in the main building, he reported through the comm. 6 are stationary, arranged in a pattern consistent with laboratory work. 9 are mobile, patrolling. But there are 2 additional signatures that don't match anything in my database. Doom and Luthor? Steve's voice crackled through the channel. Negative. These are different. Power output is off the charts. Either Vought has assets here we don't know about, or they've already started enhancing subjects, Tony finished. He was approaching from the air, altitude high enough to avoid casual detection, but low enough for his sensors to reach the facility. I'm reading exotic energy signatures from the sub-basement, same profile as the Meridian campus, but amplified. Whatever they're doing down there, they're doing it fast. Clark descended beside Tony, his X-ray vision cutting through the building's walls like they were made of paper. What he saw made his heart sink. Enhancement chambers, 12 of them. 10 are active. He paused. The subjects inside, they're not volunteers. Some of them are children. Silence on the comms. Then Peter's voice, younger than it had any right to sound. We're getting them out. Right? That's the priority? That's the priority, Clark confirmed. And Doom? Luthor? Secondary. We secure the civilians first. Then The explosion cut him off. It came from the east side of the building, a bloom of green and purple energy that tore through concrete like tissue paper. Through the smoke, 2 figures emerged. Dr. Doom, his armor crackling with eldritch power, and Lex Luthor, his warsuit reconfigured into something heavier, more aggressive, its shoulders mounting weapons that hadn't existed 12 hours ago. Between them floated a sphere of pure energy, contained within it, a swirling mass of liquid that glowed with the distinctive amber of concentrated compound V. They've got it, Tony breathed. They've got the source material. Enough to create hundreds of enhanced soldiers, Doom announced, his voice carrying across the waterfront through the armor's amplification systems. Perhaps thousands, all perfectly loyal to those who control their transformation. An army, Luthor added, his voice smooth with satisfaction. "The foundation of a new order, one we intend to build." Steve stepped out of the shadows, shield raised, the star catching the early morning light. "That's not happening. Put down the compound and step away. This doesn't have to end in violence." Doom laughed, a cold, metallic sound. "Captain, always so noble. So limited." He gestured with one gauntlet, and the energy sphere floated higher, out of easy reach. "You can't stop us. Not here. Not now. We've had hours to prepare, to study, to adapt. We understand this world's technology now, its weaknesses, its potential, and we've made improvements," Luthor added. His warsuit's weapons hummed to life. "Care to see?" The blast caught Steve square in the shield, driving him backward across the pavement. Tony responded instantly, repulsors firing, but Doom's counterspell deflected the energy harmlessly into the water. Clark moved, faster than thought, faster than light, but Luthor had anticipated this. The warsuit's chestplate opened, revealing a device that pulsed with sickly radiation, not kryptonite. Something else. Something new. Clark staggered, his powers flickering, his vision blurring. "Compound V. Refined and concentrated," Luthor explained, watching Superman fall to his knees. "Toxic to Kryptonian cellular structure, as it turns out. A weakness this world has helpfully provided." "Clark." Peter swung into the fight, webbing Luthor's face, blinding him temporarily. But Doom's response was immediate, a bolt of mystical force that caught the young hero mid-air and slammed him into the side of the building. Spider-Man didn't get up. "Peter." Tony's voice cracked with fury. He dove toward Doom, every weapon in his arsenal firing simultaneously. The air between them became a storm of energy and metal. Repulsors, missiles, unibeam, everything Tony had. Doom weathered it all. "Impressive," the dictator admitted, deflecting the final blast with a wave of his hand. "But ultimately futile. Your technology is creative, Stark. I almost admire it. But it cannot match sorcery and science combined." He raised his gauntlet. Energy gathered at his fingertips, and then Lobo hit him like a meteor. The main man had been waiting for this, circling above, watching, choosing his moment. When it came, he didn't hesitate. He dropped from 3,000 feet, hook and chain spinning, and caught Doom square in the chest. The impact drove both of them through the facility's wall and into the building beyond. "That's for the fragging illusion." Lobo's voice echoed from inside. "And this is for making me wait." The sounds of combat followed, metal against metal, energy against flesh, the particular music of two nearly indestructible beings trying to destroy each other. Luthor turned, momentarily distracted by the loss of his ally. It was the opening Steve needed. The shield hit the radiation device dead center, shattering it into fragments. Clark gasped, his powers flooding back, and before Luthor could react, Superman's hand was around his throat. "It's over, Lex." "Is it?" Luthor's smile didn't waver, even with a Kryptonian's fingers millimeters from crushing his windpipe. "Look around you, Superman. Your spider is down. Your bat is missing. Your speedster is useless. And somewhere in this facility, 10 enhanced subjects are about to wake up, programmed to serve whoever freed them from their chambers." His eyes glittered. "Care to guess who that's going to be?" The facility's doors burst open. 10 figures emerged, men and women, their eyes glowing with the distinctive light of fresh V enhancement, their movements synchronized with military precision. Luthor's army had arrived, and Clark was still holding the general. Clark made his choice in a fraction of a heartbeat. He released Luthor, not gently, but not lethally either, throwing the armored genius into the waterfront with enough force to daze, but not kill, and turned to face the enhanced soldiers advancing toward his fallen allies. 10 of them, fresh, programmed, moving with synchronized precision toward his wounded allies. Before he could intercept, 3 more figures descended from the sky. Black Noir, the Deep, and Firecracker, responding to Homelander's silent summons. The Seven had arrived to clean up the interdimensional threat. Vought property, Firecracker announced, landing beside Luthor's soldiers. These freaks belong to us now. The battle exploded across the waterfront. Steve met Noir's charged shield first, vibranium cracking against enhanced muscle as the silent killer matched him blow for blow. Tony engaged 3 soldiers simultaneously, his damaged armor screaming warnings as repulsors fired on fumes. Peter, finally conscious, webbed Firecracker's eyes and dove aside as her explosive punches cratered concrete where he'd stood. Barry ran interference, pulling civilians clear in flickering bursts of dying speed. Bruce fought from shadows, nerve strikes and toxins dropping soldiers who never saw him coming. Lobo emerged from the facility dragging Doom's battered form, saw the chaos, and grinned before launching himself at the Deep with joyful violence. Clark waded through soldiers like a hurricane, 4 down in seconds, then 2 more, but each exchange cost precious energy. The radiation still lingered in his cells. His allies were exhausted, outnumbered, fighting on willpower alone. And then the shadow fell. Homelander descended slowly, cape billowing, eyes already glowing. He'd been watching, calculating, and in the rubble he'd found something useful. Luthor's anti-Kryptonian cannon, damaged but functional. Kansas, he called, smile sharp as broken glass. Catch! The blast caught Clark square in the chest. Compound V radiation flooded his system. His vision blurred, his strength flickered. He dropped to one knee as Homelander advanced, cannon still glowing. Now Homelander breathed. Let's finish this. From a rooftop half a mile away, 2 figures watched the chaos unfold. The Joker sat on an overturned crate, legs dangling over the edge, a cigarette dangling from his lips. His eyes sparkled with delight as he tracked the expanding battle. Heroes and villains and supes and soldiers, all of them dancing to music they couldn't hear. Beautiful, he murmured. Absolutely beautiful. Beside him, Loki stood with his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful. He'd abandoned his illusions, his misdirections, his complicated schemes. Sometimes, he'd realized, the best move was no move at all. Just observation. Just patience. Joker gestured at the battle below. I showed Homelander the breaks that were already there through my broadcast, gave him permission to stop pretending. He grinned. The rest was always going to happen. I just made sure I had a good seat. Loki nodded slowly. We are not allies. God, no. I don't do allies. Too many expectations. Nor do I. But I find myself appreciating your methodology. Loki's eyes glittered with something ancient and amused. Chaos without purpose. Destruction without agenda. It's refreshing, after centuries of schemes and counter-schemes. And I appreciate yours. The Joker stubbed out his cigarette, immediately lighting another. The long game. The patience. The ability to watch empires burn and call it entertainment. He glanced sideways at the god of mischief. We're not friends. We're not partners. But we are, maybe, the only 2 people here who understand what's actually happening. And what is that? The Joker's smile widened. Everyone thinks they're the hero of their own story. Superman thinks he can save people by being good enough. Homelander thinks he can matter by being strong enough. The heroes think they can win by fighting hard enough. He laughed softly. But the universe doesn't care about good, or strong, or hard. It just keeps turning, grinding everyone down, reducing their precious narratives to dust and forgotten memory. He spread his arms, encompassing the battlefield below. That's the punchline. That's what we understand. There's no meaning, just chaos, pretending to be order. And the only sane response is to laugh. Loki was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly he began to smile. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps the chaos itself is the meaning. the constant destruction and recreation, the endless dance of order and entropy. His eyes found Homelander, frozen before Soldier Boy, found Superman, struggling to rise, found heroes fighting on fumes against impossible odds. Perhaps we are not observers of meaninglessness, but priests of a different kind of purpose. Priests. The Joker tested the word. I like that. Priests of chaos, ministers of mayhem, bishops of, don't push it. Fair enough. They settled back to watch. Below, gods and monsters tore at each other's throats. This, the Joker said softly, is going to be magnificent. Loki nodded. Yes, it is. The sun climbed higher. The battle raged on, and somewhere in the chaos, a story that had started with a breach in reality approached its bloody, uncertain conclusion. No one knew how it would end. That was what made it beautiful. Homelander fired again. The blast drove Clark further down, the radiation suppressing his powers, reducing the god from Kansas to something terrifyingly mortal. Behind them, the battle raged, Steve and Noir trading blows that cracked the waterfront, Peter barely dodging Firecracker's explosive assault, Tony's armor finally failing as 3 soldiers overwhelmed him. This is what you are, Homelander snarled, standing over Clark's kneeling form. This is what you've always been. Just another freak with power he didn't earn. And now, Clark's hand crushed the cannon's barrel. Homelander's eyes widened. How? Because power, Clark said, rising despite the radiation still burning in his cells, isn't about strength. His fist connected with Homelander's jaw. The impact sent America's greatest hero spinning across the waterfront, crashing through a shipping container, through concrete, through the hull of a derelict ship. Clark followed, diminished, running on 40%, but moving with decades of technique Homelander had never learned. Get up, Clark said. Homelander rose, spitting blood and concrete dust, his costume torn, his cape shredded. His eyes were wild, beyond rage now, beyond calculation, operating on pure animal desperation. He charged again. Clark met him in the middle. The exchange was brutal. Homelander threw everything he had, haymakers that could level buildings, heat vision bursts that could melt steel, speed that would have been impressive against anyone else. He fought with the accumulated fury of a man whose entire identity was crumbling, whose every belief about himself was being systematically dismantled. It wasn't enough. Clark was weaker than before. The compound V radiation had taken something from him, maybe 30%, maybe 40%. His punches didn't carry the same devastating force. His speed was compromised. His invulnerability had limits it hadn't possessed an hour ago. But Homelander had never learned to fight. Not really. He'd learned to destroy, learned to intimidate, learned to perform violence for cameras and crowds. But fighting, the art of it, the discipline, the 1,000 small calculations that separated a warrior from a brawler, that he had never needed. Until now, Clark slipped Homelander's right cross and answered with a liver shot that folded America's greatest hero in half. Before Homelander could recover, an elbow strike cracked across his temple. A knee drove into his solar plexus. A palm strike snapped his head back with such precision that his heat vision discharged harmlessly into the sky. Tony showed me the Vought files, Clark said, pressing forward. His voice carried across the waterfront, calm, measured, damning. You've killed people, innocent people, people who trusted you, people who believed in you. Another combination. Jab, cross, hook, each blow landing where Homelander's defense should have been, exploiting gaps he didn't know how to close. You've stood over their bodies and smiled for cameras, turned their deaths into content, into brand management. Homelander swung wildly. Clark caught his arm, twisted, and threw him 20 meters into the hull of the derelict cargo ship. The impact left a Homelander-shaped crater in the steel. The watching crowds, heroes and villains alike, had stopped fighting. Steve pinned nowhere with his shield, staring upward. Peter dangled firecracker and webs, mouth open behind his mask. Tony Stark hovered overhead, his damaged armor forgotten, recording everything. Even Lobo stopped choking the deep to watch. Homelander pulled himself from the crater. Slower now. Unsteady, his healing factor was struggling to keep up with the damage, his body finally encountering limits it had never known existed. "You don't understand," he gasped. "You don't know what they made me do, what they forced me." "You weren't forced." Clark crossed the distance between them in a blur. His hand closed around Homelander's throat, not crushing, not yet, but firm enough to lift him off his feet. "You chose. Every single time you chose. The easy path, the violent path, the path where you never had to be better than your worst impulses." He slammed Homelander into the ground, cratering the concrete. "You had power beyond imagination, and you used it to take, to control, to make yourself feel like a god because you couldn't figure out how to feel like a man." He lifted Homelander again, threw him into a shipping container, hard enough to fold it in half. That plane full of people, you could have saved them. You had the strength, the speed, the capability. But saving them wasn't convenient, wasn't clean, so you let them die and called it impossible. Another throw, another impact. Homelander's body was becoming a wrecking ball, demolishing the waterfront's infrastructure with each landing. At the rally, you could have missed. Your aim is perfect, I've seen it. But you chose to fire, chose to make a statement, chose to show the world that nothing would ever hold you accountable. Clark caught Homelander mid-bounce, drove him into the earth with both fists, and stood over the crater as dust and debris settled around them. No more excuses, no more justifications, no more Kansas and choices and redemption arcs. His voice was cold iron. "You are what you've done, and what you've done is unforgivable." Homelander lay in the crater, broken in ways that went beyond the physical. His costume was shredded, his body a canvas of cuts and bruises and burns that his healing factor couldn't process fast enough. One eye was swollen completely shut, his jaw hung at an angle that suggested it was no longer properly connected to his skull. He tried to rise. His arms gave out. He tried to speak. Blood bubbled from his lips instead of words. He tried to use his heat vision. His eyes flickered, sparked, produced nothing but pain. For the first time in his existence, Homelander was completely, utterly helpless, and Superman stood over him like judgment incarnate. "Well, well, well." Billy Butcher's voice cut through the silence. He walked across the ruined waterfront with the careful pace of a man who had seen too much to be impressed by anything, but there was something in his eyes now, something that might have been respect. "Didn't think I'd ever see the day." He stopped beside Clark, looking down at Homelander's broken form. "The man who killed my wife. Right there. Helpless. And it wasn't even me who did it." He lit a cigarette, took a long drag. Let the smoke curl into the dawn air. "You want to know what he's done? Really know?" Butcher's voice was conversational, almost casual. "Because what you've seen, the plane, the rally, the public tantrums, that's just the tip of the iceberg, the sanitized version, the bits that made it past Vaught's PR machine." He crouched beside the crater, looking into Homelander's one functional eye. "Tell him about Becca. Go on. Tell him what you did to her." Homelander made a wet, gurgling sound that might have been a denial. "He forced himself on my wife." Butcher's voice didn't waver. "Got her pregnant. And when she tried to run, tried to hide, tried to protect herself and the baby, Vought covered it up, made her disappear. Let her think she was alone for years while this piece of shit flew around, playing superhero." He stood, taking another drag. "That's not even the worst of it. The Compound V experiments on babies, thousands of them, not alive anymore or damaged, so Vought could make more products like him. The supes who asked too many questions and ended up accidents. The journalists who got too close and just stopped existing. He looked at Clark, held his gaze. He's not broken. He's not a victim of circumstance. He's a predator who's been playing with his food for 30 years. The cigarette fell. Butcher ground it out with his heel. So here's my question, Superman. His eyes were flat, empty. The eyes of a man who had already died inside and was just waiting for his body to catch up. You've got him. Right there. Helpless. And you've got the power to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Never assaults another woman. Never lets another plane crash. Never murders another child in front of cameras. He stepped back. What are you going to do about it? The waterfront was silent. Every eye fixed on the man from Kansas, standing over the monster from a lab, holding the power of life and death in hands that had never once made the wrong choice. Clark looked down at Homelander. Homelander looked up at him, one eye, bloodshot and terrified, pleading without words for something he had never once shown to anyone else. Mercy. The silence stretched, and Superman made his choice. Clark's hand closed around Homelander's throat. He lifted him from the crater, slowly, deliberately, letting everyone see. The broken god dangled like a rag doll, his feet kicking weakly at empty air, his one functional eye rolling with animal terror. Blood dripped from his mouth, his nose, the dozens of wounds that covered his ruined body. This was it. The moment. The choice that would define everything. Clark could feel Homelander's pulse beneath his fingers, rapid, thready, the heartbeat of a creature that had never once imagined this moment could come. He could feel the fragile architecture of vertebrae and cartilage, could calculate exactly how much pressure it would take to end this, to end him. Less than a thought, less than a breath. Justice. Something whispered. For Becca. For the plane. For the boy at the rally. For every victim who never got to see their monster fall. He thought about the worlds he'd saved, the lives he'd protected, the endless, exhausting, necessary restraint that defined his existence. He thought about Jonathan Kent, about lessons learned in cornfields and kitchen tables, about the weight of power and the cost of principle. He thought about what Homelander had done, what he would do again, if given the chance. The assaults, the murders, the casual atrocities of a god who had never been taught to value anything smaller than himself. Billy Butcher watched him with eyes that expected nothing and hoped for everything. The heroes watched him with eyes that feared what he might become. The cameras watched him with lenses that would broadcast this moment to millions, shaping narratives, defining legacies, writing history in real time. And Homelander watched him with the desperate, wordless plea of something that wanted to live, but had never given anyone else the same courtesy. Clark's grip tightened. Homelander made a sound, not a word, not a scream, just a wet, broken noise that might have been a sob or might have been a death rattle. His hands clutched weakly at Clark's wrist, fingers scrabbling for purchase they would never find. "You're right," Clark said quietly. His voice carried across the silent waterfront, amplified by the stillness, by the weight of the moment. About what he's done, about what he deserves. Butcher's cigarette paused halfway to his lips. "I've killed before, when there was no other choice, when the threat was cosmic, existential, when mercy would have meant extinction." Clark's jaw tightened. "I know what it costs. I know what it takes from you, the piece of yourself that never comes back." He looked at Homelander, really looked, past the blood and the terror, past the costume and the performance, down to the hollow thing at the center that had never been filled with anything except hunger. "You want to die," Clark said softly. "Part of you has always wanted to die, because living means facing what you are, and you've never been brave enough for that." Homelander's eye widened. Something fractured behind it, some last wall, some final defense. Death would be easy, quick. You'd never have to answer for any of it. Never have to sit in a cell and watch the world move on without you. Never have to see people happy, free, building lives you can't touch anymore. Clark's voice hardened. Death would be the escape you've been looking for your whole life. He lowered Homelander until his feet touched the ground, kept his grip on his throat, but loosened it enough to let him breathe, let him listen. So no, I'm not going to kill you. Butcher's face twisted. You what? I'm not going to give you what you want. Clark's eyes never left Homelander's. I'm going to give you what you need. What you've needed since the day they pulled you out of that lab and told you that power was the same thing as worth. He released Homelander's throat. The broken god collapsed to his knees, gasping, choking, his hands pressed to the concrete as if he was trying to hold himself together through sheer contact with something solid. You're going to live, Clark continued. You're going to be contained, somewhere you can't hurt anyone, can't manipulate anyone, can't perform for anyone, and you're going to spend every day of the rest of your existence confronting what you've done. Not the version Vought sold, not the narrative you told yourself, the truth. He crouched, bringing himself to Homelander's level. Every victim, every name, every face, you're going to know them all, and you're going to live with that knowledge until it either destroys you or changes you, I don't care which, but you don't get to escape. Not into death, not into delusion, not ever again. Homelander looked up at him. Tears and blood and snot streamed down his ruined face, and his voice came out broken, barely human. You can't. There's nowhere. Vought won't let. Vought is finished. Clark stood. After today, after what the world has seen, there's no coming back. The corporation that built you, that covered for you, that fed you victims and told you it was heroism, it ends here. He turned to face the assembled crowd, heroes and soups and soldiers and cameras, all of them frozen in the aftermath of something unprecedented. I'm not from this world, he said, his voice carrying across the waterfront. I don't know your politics, your history, your compromises, but I know what I've seen today. A system that creates monsters and calls them heroes. An institution that profits from violence and calls it protection. A culture that worships power and calls it justice. His eyes swept across them. The loyal Vought soldiers who had stopped fighting. The 7 members who stood uncertain and lost. The civilians who had crept back to watch once the destruction paused. That ends now. Not because I'm ordering it, I have no authority here, but because you've seen the truth. All of you, and the truth has a weight that lies can never match. He looked at Billy Butcher. The dying man with nothing left to lose stared back at him. His expression was unreadable, rage and grief, and something that might have been the first fragile seed of something other than despair. You wanted me to kill him, Clark said quietly. I understand why. If someone did to my family what he did to yours, I don't know if I could have made a different choice. Then why didn't you? Because killing him wouldn't bring Becca back, wouldn't undo any of it. Clark's voice was gentle, impossibly gentle, and because somewhere, in whatever time you have left, you deserve the chance to find something better than revenge. Something that lets you rest. Butcher's jaw worked. His eyes glistened. For a long moment he seemed on the verge of violence, of screaming, of attacking, of demanding the blood justice that had driven him for years. Then, slowly, something in him crumpled. Not surrender, not acceptance, just exhaustion. The bone-deep weariness of a man who had been fighting so long he'd forgotten what peace felt like. You really believe that, don't you? His voice was rough. All that Kansas bollocks. Hope and mercy and second chances. I believe that giving up on it makes us into the things we're fighting. Clark met his eyes. I believe that every monster was someone's child once. And I believe that the hardest victories aren't won with fists. They're won when we choose to be better than our pain. Butcher stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a broken, bitter sound that carried no humor but, perhaps, the faintest echo of something that might someday become it. "You're absolutely mental, Kansas." He shook his head slowly, "But I'll give you this. You're not a hypocrite. You believe every word of it, and that's more than I can say for anyone else wearing a cape in this godforsaken world." He looked down at Homelander, still kneeling in the rubble, still broken, still breathing. "What happens to him now?" "He goes somewhere secure," Bruce said flatly. "Somewhere designed for beings of his power level. Somewhere he can't manipulate, can't charm, can't perform." "The Phantom Zone?" Barry suggested, then paused. "Wait, do we even have access to that from here?" "We don't need it." Tony was already interfacing with his armor's systems, pulling up data. "I've been studying Vaught's containment protocols all night. They've got facilities designed for exactly this kind of situation. Supes who go too far, who become liabilities. The problem was always that Homelander was the one deciding who went in." "Not anymore," Steve said quietly. Clark turned to his allies, battered, exhausted, but standing. Around them, Vaught's forces were surrendering, the fight bleeding out of them as they watched their god broken and spared. Steve approached, shield dented, blood on his uniform. "What now?" Clark looked east, where the sun continued to rise over a world forever changed. "Now we fix what we broke, help them rebuild." He paused. "And then we find our way home." Tony limped over, armor sparking. "Strange is probably already looking for us. The dimensional signature from the breach. If we can locate Doom's artifact fragments, we'll find a way," Clark said quietly. "We always do." Behind them, Homelander was dragged away by authorities who had waited their entire careers for this moment. The cameras were rolling. The narrative was shifting. And somewhere in the city, in the spaces between shadow and surveillance, the first tremors of a reckoning were beginning. The heroes gathered in the ruins, strangers who had become allies, enemies who had become something else. Peter looked at the sunrise. "Think they'll be okay? This world?" Bruce answered, voice rough with exhaustion. "They have a chance now. A real one. That's more than they had before," Barry added quietly. Clark nodded, watching the light spread across a broken city that was already beginning to heal. They had work to do, damage to repair, a way home to find. But for this moment, standing in the ruins of everything Vought had built, having proven that power meant nothing without purpose, they had won. And that was enough. 6 months later, Billy Butcher stood at Becca's grave. The tumor had taken most of his hair and some of his vision, but he was still standing, still breathing, still fighting, in his own way, even if the battles now were political rather than physical. Vought was gone. Not destroyed, dissolved, dismantled, its assets seized, and its executives prosecuted, and its secrets laid bare for a world that had finally stopped believing the lies. The Compound V stockpiles had been destroyed. The enhancement programs had been shut down. The supes who remained were adjusting, learning to exist in a world where they were no longer products, no longer weapons, no longer gods. Some of them were even learning to be heroes. Homelander was in containment, a facility designed by Sage herself, the price of her immunity, the terms of her cooperation. He would never escape. He would never perform. He would spend the rest of his existence in a cell designed for beings of his power, surrounded by screens that showed him nothing but the truth. Every victim, every name, every face. Butcher had visited once, just once. He'd stood outside the cell and looked at the thing that had destroyed his life, and he'd felt nothing. That was the strangest part. After all the years of rage, all the fantasies of revenge, all the nights spent planning and scheming and hating, when he finally saw Homelander broken and caged and powerless, he felt nothing at all. Maybe that was healing. Maybe that was just exhaustion. Maybe it didn't matter. The Kansas bloke was right, you know, he said to Becca's headstone. About the hope thing. About choosing something better. He lit a cigarette. Took a long drag. I still think he's absolutely mental. But I think maybe that's what it takes. To be that kind of person. To keep believing when everything's telling you to stop. He exhaled smoke into the cold air. I'm not that person. Never will be. But I'm glad he exists somewhere. Glad there's a world out there where someone like him is possible. He stood in silence for a while longer, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of red and gold. Then he crushed out his cigarette and turned away. He had work to do. The world wasn't going to save itself.